You were accused of sexual harassment. You said at the time you did absolutely nothing wrong.
Correct.
Do you stand by that?
I do.
Bill O'Reilly was once the king of cable news.
Tonight is the host of the #1 cable news show in America for 15 years running. Please welcome Bill O'Reilly.
A legend who dominated primetime-like debates and award shows alike. He built an empire on controversy that captivated millions every night. But behind the bright smile and confident persona was a storm of allegations, anger, and unraveling relationships that would eventually bring his reign crashing down and causing him to start all over at age 75. How does a man at the pinnacle of power lose it all? And where is he now? Stay with us as we uncover the rise and stunning fall of Bill O'Reilly. Let's dive in. Rise of a special career. To understand the severity of a man's downfall, you need to first understand how high he got. Bill O'Reilly's rise in the world of journalism and television is a classic underdog tale. A young man from humble beginnings who was fueled by ambition, curiosity, and a knack for telling a good story. From an early age, Bill seemed to have an eagerness to learn and question the world around him. After high school, he went to Marist College, a small liberal arts school in Poughkeepsie, New York. It was here that he started to develop his interest in storytelling. Bill wasn't just a bookworm buried in academic studies. He played football, worked on the school paper, and started honing the sharp opinions that would later define his career. After Marist, he didn't just stop there. He pursued a master's degree in broadcast journalism at Boston University. This was a time when the industry was evolving, with television news gaining popularity and influence. For someone like Bill, this was the perfect opportunity. He learned the ropes of journalism, gaining the skills he needed to write compelling stories and present them with confidence. By now, he had his eyes firmly set on becoming a major player in the industry. But life never went according to plan, and you wouldn't believe where life took him next. Bill's first jobs in television weren't glamorous, but they were essential to his growth. He worked as a reporter and anchor for small stations, hopping from one city to another. In Scranton, Pennsylvania, and later in Dallas, Texas. His early gigs were where he honed his ability to take complex stories and break them down into pieces that the average viewer could easily understand. There was no ego about him then, just a hunger to succeed. As his experience grew, so did his ambition. Bill began to land bigger and better jobs, eventually moving up to major markets like Denver, Hartford, and Portland. Each city brought its own set of challenges, but Bill approached them all with the same determination and grit. He had a knack for making stories feel immediate and relevant, and his personality started to shine through on screen. Viewers liked him. He was engaging, confident, and had a way of making even the driest topics feel interesting. The turning point came when he joined CBS News as a correspondent. This was a major leap, giving him the chance to cover national and international stories. Bill didn't shy away from the tough assignments. He reported on conflicts in El Salvador and the Falkland Islands, putting himself in the middle of the action.
But now the government soldiers have driven the rebels out of town and into the mountains. The insurgents left behind this.
These experiences not only added to his credibility, but also helped him develop a commanding presence. His reports were sharp, insightful, and often carried a sense of urgency that made people sit up and pay attention. But it was his move to ABC News, and later the syndicated program Inside Edition, that really started to make him a household name. On Inside Edition, Bill's personality took center stage. He wasn't just reporting the news, he was delivering it with a punch. His bold, no-nonsense style resonated with viewers who wanted more than just the facts. They wanted someone who could connect with them.
Whatever it is, it's not right on the teleprompter. I don't know what that is. I've never seen that.
No, there is. We are going to do Sting, yeah.
Okay, but yeah, I can't read it. There's no words on it.
Whether he was covering hard-hitting investigative stories or lighter human interest pieces, he brought an undeniable energy to the screen. Then came the big break that would define his career, the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News. This wasn't just a show, it was a phenomenon. Bill had finally found the perfect platform to fully express his unique blend of journalistic instincts, sharp opinions, and charisma. The show wasn't about delivering the news in a traditional sense. It was about dissecting it, debating it, and challenging viewers to think critically. People either loved him or disagreed with him passionately, but either way, they couldn't stop watching. He had this ability to engage viewers wasn't just about his arguments. It was also about how he presented them. Bill had a conversational style that felt personal. He wasn't just talking at you, he was talking to you.
Are you as angry as I am tonight? We've known each other a long time. We've covered a lot of this kind of stuff. I am so angry about this verdict.
Often directly into the camera, as if you were sitting right across from him. That kind of connection made him one of the most recognizable and influential figures in television news. His catchphrases like, "The spin stops here," became part of the cultural lexicon, further cementing his legacy.
Finally tonight, the Factor tip of the day. Waters Miller and I had a great time in Omaha and Tacoma, Washington recently. In fact, I'd really like to do more spin stops here, live shows around the country, but I can't. I'm just too busy.
Through it all, Bill O'Reilly's rise was marked by his relentless drive, his willingness to take risks, and his ability to adapt to the ever-changing media landscape. From local newsrooms to the pinnacle of cable television, his journey was anything but ordinary. You're probably wondering where things went wrong for him. Well, keep watching to find out. Beginning of downfall. The beginning of Bill O'Reilly's downfall wasn't something that happened overnight. It was like watching cracks form in an unbreakable structure. It is subtle at first, but impossible to ignore as they spread. At the height of his career, he was a towering figure in television, a man whose voice carried weight and whose presence commanded attention. But even someone as seemingly untouchable as O'Reilly wasn't immune to the consequences of his choices and the shifting dynamics of the media world. For years, Bill had built his brand on being the straight-talking, no-nonsense figure who took on anyone and everyone. His style was bold, unapologetic, and often confrontational, which drew both admiration and criticism.
Before the column was published, did you call me?
No, and I didn't promise to call you. You have my phone number, and if you wanted to call me, you could.
I couldn't care less about it. I didn't know what you were doing.
Viewers were drawn to his ability to spark debate, but behind the scenes, there were whispers of tension. The same confidence that made him a star on screen sometimes translated into friction off-camera. There were murmurs about how he operated behind the scenes, stories that painted a picture of someone whose strong personality could rub people the wrong way. As the media landscape began to change, so did the expectations of audiences and networks. The rise of social media brought a new level of scrutiny, where every word and action could be dissected and shared in an instant. The very platform that helped amplify O'Reilly's voice now became a tool for critics to challenge him in real time. The divide between those who adored him and those who opposed him grew sharper. And the controversies that had once seemed like mere bumps in the road started to feel like warning signs. The tipping point came when details of his behavior outside the studio began to surface. These weren't just rumors. They were serious allegations that caught the attention of the public and media alike.
With the bombshell announcement from Fox News, that their biggest star is out amid growing reports of sexual harassment that sparked an advertiser revolt.
For years, such stories might have been easier to dismiss or contain, but the world was different now. Movements were gaining momentum, and people were starting to speak up about things that had long been swept under the rug. It was no longer possible to separate the man from his public persona. The cracks in the facade were becoming all too visible. As more information came to light, it wasn't just about the allegations themselves, but also how they were handled. Questions arose about accountability and the culture within the organizations he was associated with. For someone who had built a career on demanding accountability from others, this shift was particularly jarring. The dynamic was changing, and the power he once wielded with such confidence began to waver. Even his staunchest supporters were forced to grapple with what was happening. Some defended him, pointing to his years of success and the influence he had wielded. Others began to distance themselves, wary of being associated with the growing storm. It was a delicate and precarious situation, one that revealed how quickly things could change in an industry that thrives on public perception. For O'Reilly, the fallout wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The man who had once seemed so untouchable now faced the reality that his actions had consequences that couldn't be spun away. It was a stark reminder that even the most powerful figures are not immune to the shifting tides of public opinion and accountability. The beginning of his downfall wasn't just a single moment, but a series of events that chipped away at the foundation he had spent decades building. Total collapse of an icon. Bill O'Reilly's total career collapse unfolded as he found himself at the center of a series of lawsuits that exposed a side of his story that couldn't be ignored. The first cracks in his career might have seemed manageable, isolated incidents that could be addressed or swept aside. But as more accusations surfaced, it became clear that this wasn't a small storm passing through. It was a full-blown hurricane. The lawsuits were not just whispers of discontent, but detailed allegations from women who worked with or around him, painting a troubling picture of a workplace culture that enabled misconduct. These women accused O'Reilly of inappropriate behavior, harassment, and creating an environment that was anything but professional. One of the cases that came to light involved Andrea Macris, a former producer on The O'Reilly Factor.
The biggest star of Fox News is out. Bill O'Reilly's career there is done.
Yeah, the network forced him out just weeks after a New York Times report that documented multiple sexual harassment allegations against him.
Her allegations were startling and specific, claiming that O'Reilly had subjected her to unwanted advances and explicit phone calls. The details were graphic, and the case garnered widespread media attention. It wasn't just the allegations themselves that were damaging, it was also the way they contrasted with the moral high ground O'Reilly often took on his show. For someone who had built a brand on holding others accountable, these accusations struck a particularly ironic chord. What made the situation even more complicated was how these lawsuits were handled. Reports began to emerge that O'Reilly and Fox News had quietly settled multiple cases over the years, with millions of dollars paid out to accusers in exchange for their silence. These settlements weren't just financial transactions, they were admissions that something was deeply wrong, even if no guilt was publicly acknowledged. The amount of money involved raised eyebrows and fueled speculation about just how much had been hidden from the public. As these revelations unfolded, the media frenzy intensified. It wasn't just about O'Reilly anymore, it was about the culture at Fox News, a network that had long been criticized for its handling of such issues. The lawsuits against him became part of a larger conversation about workplace misconduct, power dynamics, and accountability. This was a cultural reckoning, and O'Reilly was at its center. The fallout was swift and devastating. advertisers began pulling their support from the O'Reilly factor, unwilling to be associated with the growing scandal. For a show that had been a major revenue generator for Fox News, this was a significant blow. The network faced mounting pressure to take action, not just from the public, but also from within its own ranks. Employees, shareholders, and viewers demanded accountability, and the network could no longer ignore the growing chorus of voices calling for change. Eventually, the weight of the allegations and the public outcry became too much to bear. In April 2017, Fox News announced that Bill O'Reilly would not be returning to the network.
Despite a long-time high-rating success, Fox News has dropped Bill O'Reilly.
The host of the O'Reilly Factor will not return to the cable channel over a sexual harassment scandal.
The statement was carefully worded, but the message was clear. His time at the top was over. For O'Reilly, it was a stunning fall from grace, the end of a career that had once seemed unshakable. But it wasn't just his career that took a nosedive after. When O'Reilly crashed, several aspects of his life came crashing down as well. Want to know how badly? Then stay tuned. The ugly divorce. Bill O'Reilly's divorce was a drama that played out behind closed doors, but it found its way into the public eye. At first glance, it might have seemed like just another high-profile split, something that happens in the lives of people constantly in the spotlight. But as more details trickled out, it became clear that this wasn't a simple story of two people going their separate ways. Instead, it unraveled into a tangled mess of accusations, legal battles, and emotional fallout that painted a picture far from the polished persona O'Reilly projected on screen. His marriage to Maureen McPhilmy was like any other. They shared a life, raised children, and presented a united front. But as time went on, cracks began to appear. The tension in their relationship wasn't something that could be ignored, and eventually the strain became too much. Their divorce, finalized in 2011, might have been the official end of their marriage.
Details about the divorce that Bill O'Reilly is involved in from Maureen McPhilmy. They split up back in April of 2010 and they divorced in September of 2011.
But it was far from the end of their battles. One of the ugliest parts of the divorce came with the custody fight over their two children. Custody disputes are never easy, but in this case, it became particularly bitter and contentious. O'Reilly, known for his combative nature, didn't back down, and neither did McPhilmy. Allegations flew back and forth, and the court proceedings dragged on, turning what should have been a private family matter into a spectacle that drew public attention. McPhilmy accused O'Reilly of trying to manipulate the situation to his advantage. She claimed that he used his wealth and influence to sway the outcome of the custody battle. Meanwhile, O'Reilly painted himself as a devoted father who only wanted what was best for his kids. It was a classic he said, she said scenario, with both sides presenting wildly different versions of the truth. Things took an even darker turn when reports surfaced about O'Reilly's behavior at home. One particularly shocking allegation came from their daughter, who reportedly told a court-appointed forensic examiner that she had witnessed O'Reilly physically abusing her mother. She described an incident where O'Reilly allegedly dragged McPhilmy down a staircase by her neck. The accusation was deeply unsettling, not just because of its nature, but because it contrasted so starkly with the image O'Reilly had cultivated over the years as a moral authority and defender of traditional family values. O'Reilly vehemently denied the claims, calling them 100% false, and accusing his ex-wife of using the children to damage his reputation. He maintained that he was a loving and caring father, committed to his family even after the divorce, but the damage was done. The allegations, combined with the bitter custody battle in which he lost his children, created a narrative that was impossible to ignore. For someone who had built a career on taking moral stances, the divorce and its aftermath cast a long shadow over his public image. The legal battles didn't end with the custody fight. O'Reilly and McPhilmy continued to clash over financial matters and the terms of their divorce agreement. It seemed like every aspect of their separation was fraught with conflict, each new dispute adding another layer of bitterness to an already toxic situation. For years, the fallout from their divorce lingered, a constant reminder of how messy and painful the end of a marriage can be, especially when played out in the public eye. In the end, the divorce revealed a side of O'Reilly that many of his fans had never seen before. It wasn't just about the end of a marriage, it was about the unraveling of a carefully constructed image. The man who had once seemed so in control, so commanding, now appeared vulnerable and deeply flawed. Later on, O'Reilly accused McPhilmy of misleading him on the terms of their separation agreement. He claimed that McPhilmy used the money she got from their agreement to finance an existing extramarital relationship. You can see that his marriage was no walk in the park. And if you think that was extreme, just wait till you find out what his relationship with his children is like. Bill's children's view of him. The way Bill O'Reilly's children described him as an angry man painted a picture that felt strikingly different from the one his viewers were used to seeing on TV. On screen, he was known for his fiery debates and sharp criticisms, but these were often seen as part of the show, a persona crafted for the camera. Behind closed doors, though, it seemed like that intensity followed him home, creating an atmosphere that his children found hard to live with. The descriptions weren't just passing comments. His children reportedly spoke of his temper, a constant presence that loomed over the family dynamic. It wasn't the kind of anger that blew over quickly either. It was the kind that lingered, shaping the tone of interactions and leaving a mark on the relationships within the home. For kids, living with that sort of tension can feel like walking on eggshells, never knowing what might trigger an outburst. What made their accounts particularly striking was how detailed and personal they were. One of the most talked about descriptions came during the contentious custody battle between O'Reilly and his ex-wife, Maureen McPhilmy. Their daughter allegedly told a court-appointed evaluator that her father's anger wasn't just something she witnessed, it was something she felt deeply. She recounted moments when his temper would flare, turning ordinary situations into volatile encounters. It wasn't just the volume of his voice or the sharpness of his words. It was the way his anger seemed to fill the room, making it hard to breathe, let alone relax. These descriptions didn't just cast O'Reilly as an angry man. They painted him as someone whose anger shaped the very fabric of family life. For his children, it wasn't just about specific incidents, but the overall feeling of being in his presence. The emotional weight of that kind of environment can be overwhelming, especially for young minds still trying to make sense of the world. It can make home feel less like a sanctuary and more like a place of unease. The contrast between O'Reilly's public persona and these personal descriptions was jarring. On TV, he often presented himself as a champion of traditional family values, someone who believed in discipline and structure. But his children's accounts suggested that behind the scenes, those values sometimes manifested as strictness to the point of intimidation. It wasn't just about rules and expectations. It was about the emotional toll that came with them. For someone like O'Reilly, who thrived on control and order, the idea that his children might see him as an angry man likely struck a nerve. It's one thing to face criticism from viewers or colleagues, but hearing it from your own children carries a weight that's hard to shake. Their words weren't just criticisms, they were reflections of how his behavior had shaped their experiences and perceptions of him. What made the situation even more poignant was the fact that these descriptions came out in the context of a bitter divorce and custody battle. In such a charged atmosphere, every word carries extra weight. Every accusation feels magnified. But even with that context in mind, the way his children spoke of him left an impression that couldn't be ignored. Despite his life and career falling apart, you would never guess what O'Reilly did next. O'Reilly after Fox News. When Bill O'Reilly left Fox News, it was as if a giant hole was dug in the channel. He had been the face of the network for years, a name synonymous with primetime television and fiery debates. But once he was out, the rhythm of his life and career changed completely. It wasn't like he disappeared overnight. Someone like O'Reilly doesn't just fade into the background. Instead, he shifted gears, trying to carve out a new path while grappling with the reality of no longer being at the top of the cable news world. At first, there was curiosity about what he would do next. People wanted to know if he'd start another show, join a rival network, or find some other high-profile gig. O'Reilly, however, opted for a route that felt both familiar and different. He turned to the digital world. He launched a podcast called No Spin News, which carried the same title and tone as his famous Fox segment. It was as if he was saying, "I'm still here, doing what I've always done, just in a new space." The show became a platform for him to speak directly to his audience, without the constraints of a network. It gave him freedom, but it also came with the challenge of maintaining relevance in an increasingly crowded digital landscape. Despite stepping into this new territory, it wasn't the same as his days at Fox. The reach of cable television, with its millions of viewers, couldn't be replicated easily online. His podcast and website attracted a loyal following, but the scale was different. It was like going from playing in a packed stadium to performing for a smaller, more intimate crowd. O'Reilly leaned into this change, speaking to his core audience in a way that felt personal and direct. Yet, the buzz around his name started to fade as the media landscape moved on and other voices filled the void he left behind. Away from the camera, O'Reilly seemed to focus more on his writing. He continued his Killing series, a string of historical books that had been wildly successful even before his departure from Fox. These books gave him a way to stay in the public eye and maintain his reputation as a storyteller. They didn't carry the controversy of his on-air persona, but instead highlighted his ability to weave compelling narratives about history's pivotal moments. For O'Reilly, writing became not just a career move, but a way to stay relevant in a world that seemed increasingly eager to move past his television legacy. But his post-Fox life wasn't all about work. The absence of his nightly show opened up time for other pursuits, including a quieter, more private existence. While he still made occasional appearances in interviews or public events, he seemed to step back from the constant spotlight. It was a shift that likely came with its own set of challenges. For someone who had thrived on the energy of being in the center of the action, adjusting to a slower pace might not have been easy. Yet O'Reilly appeared to embrace it, focusing on the things he could control and letting go of the rest. One thing that didn't change was his willingness to speak his mind. Whether on his podcast, in interviews, or through his books, O'Reilly continued to share his views on politics, culture, and media. He remained unapologetically himself, leaning into the traits that had both defined his success and drawn criticism over the years. This consistency was a double-edged sword because while it kept his core audience engaged, it also reinforced the polarizing image that had made him a lightning rod for controversy. Do you think the accusations made against him are true? Or are they just stories made up to pull him down? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.